Yo guys, what's going on? I'm Tim for The Real Sports Talk. Hit me up on Twitter at CashKelly_TRST. That is Cash Kelly with a K. You can also like The Real Sports Talk on Facebook to get all the updates from the show and our thoughts on games and sporting events going on at pretty much any time. Today is day 23 of the 30 days out of the MLB preview videos we're doing, and we go to the AL wildcard champion Tampa Bay Rays, a team that made the last day of the season one of the most memorable days in MLB history. I mean, first of all, they're down so many games, and they come back to within one game of the Red Sox. Then they tie it. Going into the last day, they tied it. The Red Sox are winning going into the 9th inning. The Rays are down 6-0 going into the 8th inning, and the Rays made it 6-5. I was talking with my friend who's a Rays fan, Richard Jambrin, and he told me, this is one of the most amazing innings of baseball I ever saw. But then they left a guy on third base, and it was 6-5, and I thought, Mariano Rivera coming in, it's really going to suck for Rays fans because they're going to end up losing this game 6-5. They didn't. They ended up taking it to extra innings where Evan Longoria ultimately put this team in the playoffs as the Red Sox blew the game. Jonathan Papelbon's final game there, and Evan Longoria was able to hit a walk-off home run that barely got over the wall, but it did after Dan Johnson sent it to extra innings. So the Rays have that to follow up. Last season really did not do a ton in the playoffs. Had a really nice first game behind Matt Moore's only, I think his third start in his MLB career. He did tremendous, but from there the Rangers just took control of the series. So they need to improve on what they did. Some of the people they acquired this offseason were bringing back Carlos Pena, which is absolutely huge. They brought in Luke Scott to be a DH. So, those are really the two big accusations that they made this offseason, but two really nice ones, I believe. Let's start at catcher with Jose Molina. You know him because he's pretty much been around the MLB for the last 10 seasons with the Angels, with the Yankees, and with the Blue Jays the last 2 seasons. He's never really been that everyday catcher for too many teams, and when he hasn't been a great hitter. But last year he had his best hitting season probably of his career, hit a career-high 281 in 55 games with 12 home runs and 3 home runs and 15 RBIs, so he actually had a pretty nice season. He's not going to bring a ton as a hitter, but he is a pretty nice fielder, much like his brother Yadier. Backing him up at catcher, you have Jose Lobaton, who has only played 22 games in his MLB career, so there's not a ton to go off of. Hit 118 in 15 games, if that really means anything to you last season. Over at first base, the aforementioned Carlos Pena. This is a huge addition. He might not be the same guy that hit 46 home runs in 2007, but he's going to give you a solid 30, 35, and to add that back into a lineup that already made the playoffs is huge. Now, the last 2 seasons he really did struggle with his average. In 2010, his last season with the Rays, and then last year's only season with the Cubs, he hit 225. So you would like to see him get that average back up. But he's never really been an average guy. Even in 2009, when he hit 39 home runs and 100 RBIs, he hit 227. So to expect an average to be really higher than 250 is probably not very realistic, but if you get the 35 home runs, you know what you're getting. It's not like you're paying for a guy that normally hits 280 in Carlos Pena. You're paying for a guy that normally hits 220, 230, 240, but if you get the type of power production, it's pretty much all worth it. He is going to strike out quite a bit, but besides Adrian Gonzalez and Albert Pujols, what power hitters aren't going to do that? At DH, you'll have Luke Scott, the other big name they acquired this offseason. In 64 games last year, he had an injury. He had 220 with 9 home runs and 22 RBIs. But prior to that, the 3 seasons before, one of the reasons I think that this guy is so underrated, his first 3 seasons at Baltimore, he had 23 home runs, 25 home runs, and 27 home runs. And adding him into this lineup, the lineup that they had in Baltimore was actually pretty formidable, but it didn't become that till his 3rd or 4th year there. Adding him into a lineup like this is only going to help him. I actually would not be surprised if he's able to stay healthy and he gets to play in most of the games. I believe that he will hit close to 30 home runs this season. Ben Zobrist will be the starting second baseman. Last year for the Rays in 156 games, he had 269 with 6 home runs and 29 RBIs or 20 RBIs. He's never going to be a great power guy, and therefore he's never going to give you a ton of RBIs. But you would like to see, or sorry, he had 20, my bad. He had 20 home runs with 91 RBIs. What am I saying? He's never going to be a great power guy. He actually does bring quite a bit of power. He's going to hit you 15 to 20 home runs this year and 80 to 90 RBIs, somewhere in that area. He's never going to bring much power. Elliott Johnson will be the backup. In 70 games last year, he hit 194 with 4 home runs and 17 RBIs. I like him as a backup, but not much more than that because he's not an overall great hitter. He's like 27, 28 years old. He's going to be a nice utility piece for the Rays, entering his 3rd season with the Rays. Really his 2nd full season, though. Sean Rodriguez will be the starting shortstop last year for the Rays. In 131 games, he had 223 with 8 home runs and 36 RBIs. It's not terrible. He stole 11 bases, but I think you want the performance closer to the 2010 Sean Rodriguez, where he hit just above 250 with 9 home runs and 40 RBIs. Struck out a little bit more, but he gave you more stolen bases and a higher average, so you'll take that. He does have a pretty good glove at shortstop. Reed Brignac will actually get some appearances too, because Sean Rodriguez is not going to be a 7-day-a-week, 162 games a year type player, but Reed Brignac is a nice backup. In 92 games last year, he was able to give you 15 RBIs. That was actually a down year for him. In 2010, though, he had a nice year. He had 256 with 8 home runs and 45 RBIs. That was in 113 games. So I think that it was just a matter of last season and did not get quite the amount of at-bats that he needed to be successful. Evan Longoria over at third base. I mean, Evan Longoria right now is probably the best overall third baseman in the game. With Alex Rodriguez completely falling off the map last season, Evan Longoria has really taken that next step. He had 244 last year, which is the one thing that has gone down, or that went down last year. But the power numbers went up. The RBIs were pretty close. He drew a few more walks last year and struck out way less. He did miss some games, and that was part of the Rays' problem last year, and why they were very close to not making the playoffs was that they were missing him for quite a bit of the year. But he came back, and I think he is one of the more clutch hitters in the game right now. He had 31 home runs, 99 RBIs last year. I think he's the best third baseman. A lot of people have Evan Longoria in their MVP race, and it's pretty easy to see why. In right field, Matt Joyce will be your starting right fielder. Matt Joyce, in 141 games last year, really his first full season as a starter, hit 19 home runs and 75 RBIs. There were a lot of people that when he came over from, it was either the Twins or the Tigers, I forget. Yeah, it was the Tigers. When he came over from the Tigers, that thought, this guy has a lot of potential. It's a matter of him getting out there. Well, he didn't necessarily get that chance his first 2 seasons. He played 77 games in 2010. But in 2011, when he really got that chance, he showed you he has quite a bit of potential. He's certainly good enough to be a starter. There's a lot of outfielders, though, that can hit you 280 with 19 or 20 home runs. He needs to separate himself this year. I think he'll do that. I think he'll hit more in the area of 24 home runs this year and probably about 285. He will improve on his season last year, and he is somewhat of a threat on the base as he stole 13 bases last year and only got caught once. In center field, B.J. Upton entering a contract year. In 153 games for them last year, he had 243 with 23 home runs and 81 RBIs. I've always kind of thought that he was overrated. He's always had a ton of potential, but since the 2010 season or 2007 season where he hit 300 with 24 home runs and 82 RBIs, he's never really been able to match that performance. If he can do something like that, which in a contract year is more along the lines of what I'm expecting, I think about 295, 25 home runs, 80 RBIs, then he's going to be in for a nice payday. If not, then there is a chance that you could see him shipped at the deadline if the Rays are not in contention, because there are going to be some teams interested in him. He's certainly not his brother Justin on the Diamondbacks, but when he is playing well, he is a nice player. He's pretty fast. He gives you a lot of stolen bases. He's stolen over 40 bases 3 times in his career, and he is a pretty solid fielder out in center field. Desmond Jennings will be your starting left fielder. This is one of the guys that had a ton of a lot of people have said he has had a ton of potential, and he got to play in 63 games last year, 247 total at-bats, at 259 with 10 home runs and 25 RBIs. If that's in 63 games, you had about 100 games that, and I think you're close to 20-25 home runs, an average around 260, 265. He's going to be a nice piece for the future. Now, He's probably not going to hit for a high average right away this year. I think that'll increase as his career goes along, and he is going to strike out quite a bit, but the power numbers are going to be pretty nice for Desmond Jennings, and he's a pretty solid overall fielder. Also, he stole 20 bases in that amount of time. He's a pretty good fielder, so Desmond Jennings is going to be a very good overall outfielder. He doesn't just bring one aspect of the game. This year, he's not going to put it all together, but he's going to still have a very good season. Sam Fuld is out in left field, and this is a nice guy to have as a backup in the outfield for your team. Hit .240 last year with 3 home runs and 27 RBIs, stole 20 bases, so he is also a nice guy to bring off the bench to be a pinch hitter. Then there is a starting pitching, which kind of does separate them from the Red Sox in a lot of people's mind because they have such a solid 1-2 punch. We'll start with James Shields entering a contract year. After 2 down seasons, really came back and had a really solid season last year for them. Had 11 complete games to lead the major leagues in almost 250 innings, went 16-12 with a 2.82 ERA. This guy was a legit ace last year. You hope that you get the James Shields from last year, because if you get the one from 2009 or 2010, then that is really going to change the tide of the Rays' playoff hopes. He is in a contract year, as I mentioned also, and if things really don't go well, then you could see him get traded. He'll probably walk at the end of the season because the Rays are so small market, but Andrew Friedman knows what he's doing. I believe he is the best general manager in the game right now, and I believe that if the Rays really have a chance to win the World Series, they're going to keep him and try and play it out the way they did with Carl Crawford a few seasons ago. Hopefully you get the James Shields from last year. David Price at the number 2. I mean, he's besides Cliff Lee and Matt Cain, probably the second best number 2 in the game right now, and maybe even Adam Wainwright if he can stay healthy. He had a down year last year, and this is a down year for him. 12-13 with a 3.49 ERA. How many pitchers do we look at if they have an ERA under 3.50 in another division and say, yeah, that wasn't a terrible season? And to do that in the AL East makes it even more impressive that was a down year. That being said, if the Rays are going to really make a run, he can't have another season like he did last year. He needs to be more like the 2010 David Price, who went 19-6 with a 2.72 ERA. That is a David Price they need, because if that's the case, they have 2 legitimate aces in this rotation. Jeremy Hellickson will be at the number 3 spot. Hellickson, I was reading a thing in SI, the MLB preview the other day, saying that there's like this thing Tom Verducci has done over the past few seasons that has shown that pitchers who see the type of spike in innings that he saw last year, which was almost 150 more innings than he saw the season before, the season after that it tends to really show. So we'll see. He went 13-10 with a 2.95 ERA. If you can have 3 guys in this rotation, and you have 2 other guys that have a real good chance to do that as well, have an ERA under 3, then you're in a really good situation. Wade Davis will be the number 4 starter. He's been disappointing since he came up. His first year in 2009, he came up, looked pretty solid, even through a complete game. Since then, he's had a 4.07 ERA in 2010 and a 4.45 one last year. When he came up, he was viewed as a top prospect, as pretty much everyone the Rays bring up is, and he has not quite lived up to that so far. I think that this is a year that he's going to have to take that step if he ever is going to be a legitimate number 2 or 3 starter in the MLB. Right now, he's a number 4 or 5. Matt Moore will be at the number 5 spot, my Rookie of the Year pick. Matt Moore, to me, from what I saw out of him last year, I think he is going to be lights out. I think he'll win 15-plus games and have an ERA under 3, and to do that in the AL East is extremely impressive. I think he'll throw a 2 or 3 complete games as well. So the Rays are very deep in that starting rotation. They even have a guy in Jeff Neiman who can come in if they were to trade James Shields, or if they decided they didn't want Wade Davis in the rotation anymore, anything like that. You have another option there, so that's nice. Their big 3 in their bullpen starts with Fernando Rodney, who has never really been a great pitcher, but he can give you some save opportunities, which is nice if Kyle Farnsworth needs a day off, and he is going to be the setup man. Joel Peralta was the setup man for them last year as well. Obviously, you have 2 setup men. Went 3-4 last year with a 2.93 ERA. That's impressive, and he saved 6 out of 8 games, which is also very good. So it's not great, or he would be a closer, but 6 out of 8 for a non-closer is not bad. So to have that option there is nice. And then Kyle Farnsworth, who seems like he's been in the MLB since basically I've been watching with the Chicago Cubs and the Yankees, had a nice season last year. 5-1 with a 2.18 ERA, saved 25 of 31 games. He's not an elite closer, but if you blow 5 or 6 saves, you're right around the league average, and he did a nice job last season for the Rays. Overall, I think that the Rays are a legitimate contender, as pretty much any team in the AL East is, except for the Orioles, and I guess the Blue Jays aren't really a legit contender. But I look at the Rays, and I think that they could make a World Series run if some things fall their way. If Matt Moore has a really nice season. If David Price can get back to form that we saw a few years ago. It's a very crowded American League with the Tigers, the Angels, the Rangers, the Red Sox, and the Yankees. And really, even with 2 wild cards this year, there's really no guarantee that any team in the American League is going to go to the playoffs. So their biggest task may not be winning a World Series, but just getting out of their own division.